My downstairs neighbors wouldn't stop their music terrorism, so I dropped an audio nuke that ended their relationship. I lived above the human equivalent of a subwoofer, and his name was Blake. When he first moved into the apartment below mine, he was actually tolerable. Just some guy in his 20s who'd play music too loud on weekends and actually turn it down when I texted him about it. We had this unspoken agreement where he'd party and I'd pretend not to hear it, and everyone stayed civil. Then his girlfriend Sophie moved in 3 months later and convinced him that consideration was weakness, that neighbors were enemies, and that bass frequencies were a form of territorial dominance. Sophie was the type who thought the world existed to accommodate her schedule, and she had this way of making Blake believe it too. At first, it was just annoying stuff like them playing music on random weeknights and leaving their laundry in the shared machines for days, the kind of things you roll your eyes at but let slide. Then they graduated to deliberate warfare, like when I'd text Blake about the 2 a.m. bass sessions, and instead of apologizing, they'd crank it louder and add screaming matches to the mix. Or when Sophie started banging on her ceiling with what sounded like a sledgehammer every time I took a step, shrieking that I walked like a rhinoceros even though I'd started tiptoeing in my own apartment like a burglar. By month 2, they'd gone full psychopath, leaving rotting garbage bags in our shared hallway until maggots appeared, spreading rumors to other tenants that I was a drug dealer, which explained all my strange visitors, my family. And when it was their turn to mow the lawn, they told the landlord I'd threatened them with violence if they touched it, nearly getting me evicted until I showed him our text history proving they were lying. Then my wife got pregnant and everything went to hell. She needed specific conditions to sleep even before the pregnancy, but now she couldn't sleep at all with the constant noise. One night the music was so loud, our wedding photo fell off the nightstand and shattered, and my wife just sat there crying. I went downstairs and knocked politely, trying to explain the situation, and Sophie opened the door wearing this smirk that made my blood boil. She said, if we couldn't handle apartment living, maybe we should buy a house in the suburbs where we belonged, then slammed the door and cranked the volume until I could feel it in my teeth. Standing in that hallway, listening to my pregnant wife sob upstairs while Sophie laughed behind her door, something in me snapped. My dad played bass in a metal band in the 80s, and still had this monster speaker in his garage, a 5-foot-tall professional concert speaker that could make your ears bleed from a quarter mile away. We loaded it into my apartment on Sunday while Blake and Sophie were gone, and I positioned it face down on my living room floor, right above their bedroom. I spent hours creating the perfect playlist of psychological warfare, sine waves at frequencies that blur your vision, the Washington Post march on endless repeat, lengthy sermons about hell and damnation since Sophie had a proud atheist bumper sticker, the chicken dance, and the Captain Planet theme song all mixed at random intervals. The beauty of my plan was its complete legality, since noise ordinances only applied before 9 a.m. and after 10 p.m., giving me 13 blessed hours of revenge every single day. Day 1 started at exactly 9 a.m. with a sine wave so powerful it knocked their ceiling fan off its mount, and I watched from my window as they ran outside looking for construction equipment that didn't exist. Day 2 brought the marching music and sermon combination, and I found a pile of dog crap on my doormat, which meant I was getting to them. Day 3 was when they called the cops, and I almost laughed when the officers knocked on my door at 2 p.m., looking confused about being called for daytime noise. The lead officer checked his watch and told me that while it seemed excessive, playing music at 2 p.m. wasn't illegal, though his partner was trying not to smile when the chicken dance started playing behind us. Sophie was screaming at them from the parking lot about harassment, but they just got in their car and left while she stood there turning purple with rage. Day 4 brought a text from Blake saying, please stop, she's losing it. And day 5, his message read, she left me bro, you win, please just stop. I texted back, 1 more day for the dog crap, and gave him 6 more hours of Captain Planet before finally pulling the plug. A week later, Blake knocked on my door, holding a 6-pack and a gift basket for the baby, looking sheepish, but somehow relieved. He said Sophie had been controlling everything from his schedule to his friends, and my speaker assault was the push he needed to see how toxic she'd made his life. We cracked open beers right there in my doorway, while he told me she'd left him for being too weak to defend their territory, and had already moved in with some gym bro she'd been texting. He admitted he'd never even liked loud music that much, but she insisted it showed dominance, and now his apartment was so quiet, he could finally think straight. We started grabbing beers every Friday after that, and he became the best neighbor I could ask for. He dates a librarian now who brings me homemade cookies and apologizes if she laughs too loud at his jokes, and sometimes we joke about that week when I turned his ceiling into a war zone. Sometimes you have to nuke a friendship into existence.